Lesson planning is all about being prepared for the classroom. So within a lesson plan, there are 3 areas you need to be looking at. The first is building on prior knowledge. What do your students know? So that comes into assessment, diagnostic assessment. The next part of lesson planning is your main body, what you want the students to learn. So this is the activity or the knowledge that you want students to be learning. So this is where all your teaching and learning is done. The last part of your lesson planning would be bringing it all together, the reflection, the evaluation with your students and knowing what they've learned.
It's an expectation when a tutor comes on board that they can and will plan lessons, because a program always starts with a curriculum which is an accredited format for learning. So from there they develop a course or a program, and they have to develop that further into lesson plans. So every little or every module or every unit is broken down into a series of plans. And that just gives a really definite line of where the learning's going. You'll have a starting point and an ending point. So lesson plans sort of develop the mid-centre where each unit or each point is addressed in some depth and it's documented. So there's often a direct teaching point that needs to come out of it, or there's something specific that the learners will experience.
Often you understand the topic really well yourself, but you've got to realise that most of your students it's brand new for them. So you certainly need to have thought about the sequence of activities and the sequence of material so that it makes sense and it builds a picture for the learner, and that they can see exactly where you're going and the purpose of why you're heading in the direction you are. Yeah, I think that I've been teaching for quite a while, so it's something to always remember, that the student's new to it and needs a good solid structure to the lesson that you're taking.
Students need to know what they're learning and teachers need to know what they're teaching. So a good way of starting a lesson is to have a clear learning outcome, so all students know what they're learning and the teacher's clear on what they're teaching.
Having an outcome is something that's quite prescribed. So within a course you'll have learning outcomes. When you get to the end of it, that's what you'll expect that your learners will have learned, the outcomes. So that's sort of where you're heading to with your lesson plans. So you're going to develop your lesson plans around the outcomes in the curriculum. So it's already prescribed and stated what you must teach. So now you must develop your plans and your teaching strategies around the learning outcomes. They have to be measurable, so they can't be sort of really broad and wide. They have to be something that you can look at and say, yes, you have achieved this, or perhaps no, you haven't.
One of the ways to do that is write that on the board. Today we will be learning about as a good example of a clear learning outcome. You need to be specific when you're writing learning outcomes. It needs to be measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound, so that when you go back and reflect on your learning outcome, that it's clear that you've met the objective of your learning outcome.
I keep the structure fairly close to the assessment, because for quite a number of students that will be quite a big concern for them. So the PowerPoint slides and the structured parts of the lesson would very closely tie to the assessments that the students will be doing, and especially the ones that are closer to the time frame of when you're running the lesson. And then the other bits, the less structured bits, can expand on that and can illustrate some of those points and be more real life application, and to keep the people who want to use it in a more practical way. So you have some students that are just looking towards assessments, and some are actually wanting to use it in practical terms in the near future. So yeah.
There is a delicate balance in the amount of structure that is needed for a good lesson plan. It is important that the lesson is able to meet all of the learning outcomes, but it also needs the flexibility for the tutor to be able to move the lesson in different directions.
Research is now swinging away from lesson plans being so structured, but it's quite a difficult thing to get away from, because we do need lots of structure in our lesson plans, but once again also they need to be able to move and be a little bit fluid and sort of move in different directions, and also tapping into those really critical teaching moments where you can see the students or the learners have really picked up on some understanding. So even though they are quite set in boundaries, lesson plans really have to be able to move along with the needs of the students.
Generally, as a tutor, you'd have key points throughout the session that you're trying to get across, and you build exercises around those, and have time where you can have the students ask questions and move off into down tangents often, and talk about examples and ask their own questions, and then you come back to the structure that the PowerPoint slides etc. give you to move through a class.
Oh, well, I guess interactive lesson planning is all about actively engaging students in the learning. So instead of being, like they say, a stage on the stage, you're the facilitator or the guide on the side. That's an old quote, but it rings true. So that you are watching your students learn, you've got activities that are engaging them in learning and meaningful learning, and they are able to tell you what they're learning.
I think that's a really good aim to have, is to be more a facilitator than a font of all knowledge, in that a lot of the best learning comes from other students and from other people's perspectives. You've got to realise that you don't know everything and that you haven't got it perfect, and that everyone else has something of value to add. So yeah, it's good to have that, and to have that flexibility in your planning to allow that to happen.
Formative assessment is a continuous process of observing how well the students are learning and implementing the skills and knowledge that they are being taught. This assists the tutor in understanding which areas may require more attention.
Formative assessment is really assessment on the go. You're looking at how the learning is progressing. So you're not doing it at the beginning to see what they know or at the end to see what they have learned. It's along the way, and it's the most important part of assessment because you're looking at their learning along the way, and often that's where you find little gaps or where they haven't quite picked something up. And formative assessment can be observations, class discussions, it can be a whole array of activities, even in your games or anything at all, and that gives the tutor an indication of what they have learned and perhaps what they need to a little bit more on.
Formative assessment is one of the most important types of assessment because it gauges where your students are at. It's something that's not meant to be a formal process, but it's an ongoing process throughout your whole teaching. And formative assessment can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done by your professional judgment, class tick lists, simple activities related to what you've been teaching, and then just checking to see that students have acquired that knowledge. Formative assessment can be done in written form if you like, but you have to look wider when it comes to formative assessment because they're just quick tick lists of students learning.